So, as a candidate for Toronto mayor, we're going to address some issues in the Toronto community. Canada's largest housing corporation cannot have a reputation of not being forthright and not being fair and not being lawful. And that's the stigma that Toronto community housing. People don't refer to it as Toronto cocaine housing or Toronto cracker housing or Toronto corrupt housing. Housing has changed now so much that the safety, security, and well-being of tenants are liable. So many tenants are coming stating that things are missing out of their units. And many different reasons this could happen. Because housing just gives the keys to any tenant unit, to any contractor, or any employees of the contractor and agency. That is unacceptable. You have housing staff on only twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays, and yet, so you have no one, the super is not working 24/7, or you don't have 2 or 3 supers like you used to. But our tenants feel safe, knowing that any too big contractor could live in the country, nothing against those who just come to the country, 3 to 6 months, as many contractors I've encountered, be given keys to your private residence, to your home, to your sanctuary, to your sanctuary, your place of peace, your place of relaxation, your place where you can bring up your children, your place where you can entertain, where you can shower, where you can clean, where you can eat. Now, thank God for the wrongful accusation and the illegal acts of Detective, I call it Hitler mentality. Peter, Kruczek. And we found out that what the judge and what the prosecutor were questioning about. Why would the police do this? Why would a fire marshal do this? And as the crown attorney, I think his name was Richardson or Hutchinson, stated, he says, I understand you gave us 3 weeks to produce a fire marshal report. And we sent so much emails to the fire marshal. And they're telling us a story that this person in charge is not back until the day after the case. But yet, you extended it again another 30 days, Your Honor. And yet we send these emails and yet no response. And then the detective says he doesn't have any like the connection or other details we asked for. But in the first place, the detective says it was the words of that fire marshal that he used to charge this individual. Are you saying the detective was making criminal charges without documentation? That's not possible. How can you lay a legal charge against a Canadian citizen saying that you are using the authority of individuals from Toronto Fire, but yet you don't have that documentation in writing? That's why you are there as a detective. If that's what was said, then you would have to secure that documentation. And if you didn't secure that documentation, then you can't charge this person until you have that documented evidence, because you'll end up with cases as you saw with mine, that you were challenged in a court of law and you had no documentation, which said that you had none of this information that you said you used before you laid these heinous, unlawful, incompetent, or corrupt allegations against an individual who had 0 motive. But then we find out that someone did have a motive. The police had a motive. The police had a motive because at the time of these charges, not only was the person you laid all these heinous charges against, Toronto Mayor candidate Mr. Kevin Clark, in the Supreme Court of Canada, against the city of Toronto, and against the appointment of appointed mayor Sylvia Chapman. But also we found out after, which the people don't know, is that I was also in the human rights against Toronto Community Housing. And I was also in the Superior Court of Ontario contesting and putting the police and their overseer, the OIPRD, now called LECA, on trial for corruption. And it turned out through emails we had received that the courts ruled in her favor. And this was the point time of this fire. And also, a beautiful lady here who has changed my life, whose grandson is around here, she brought me food just before this happened. So there's no motive, no opportunity for this individual to have done what these individuals corruptly, the only word you can use, unlawfully, purposely, deliberately, collaborated, because there's no way this could have happened just by itself. 3 different agencies, throwing the fire, throwing the police, and throwing the housing, collapsing, coming together. But then the question is, was there involvement with throwing the fire? Because by their refusal to, or them not returning emails, maybe they didn't know that the police and housing or the detective, Peter Crusoe, was going to try and pull the stunt. Because he felt that, as Adolf Hitler said, some people are insecure. And he felt that because we were all mental health out, that we were inferior, and you can use that mental health record to make an allegation that is so disturbing that only if somebody was extremely mentally ill would they have committed the act that Peter Crusoe alleged with 0 evidence, motive, or opportunity. The only thing that he used to, and I said 0 evidence, because this was not evidence, Mr. Clark. He used my own words of how I found out about the fight, twisted it to say that this is how he started the fight. And thank God for the judge and the crown who thought through it all. And even though it took a long period of time, 8 months, where an animal had to risk our life, we understand the procedures of the courts and the crown and their obligation to the law. But Peter Crusoe had an obligation to the law, not to lay false, fabricated criminal charges that he knew was not sustainable in a court of law, because he felt that somebody was inferior, because he felt that because of their mental health records, that they could have been treated less and be given less rights under the law. The only evidence that was put forth was the evidence I gave of how I found out the fire. And they fabricated, clearly fabricated story to say this is how he said he started. No, I said how I found out about it. In turn, it took the law to restore my rights, but the damage was also done. And also now we have an extremely amount of evidence against Crusoe and housing. Because the fire, they tried to tell me, was the whole unit when it was in the bedroom from the video that was taken by Jim Forsett and from across the field. But also the security camera that proved everything I said disappeared. The system that was used to hold all the evidence, all that comes off the security camera, that disappeared. And in turn, housing police would not allow us to go to our unit, even though the courts gave us that we had 2 opportunities, because we had not allowed to take photos or videos of the scene, the tragedy that was in my home. And also, the word that my 2 animals are dead, and yet in turn, no one can explain where is the body of my animals. When was the autopsy done? How do we know my 2 animals died? Because they tried to make the allegation that my animals were bumped up in the fire. But the video that they showed and the photos they produced showed that was not the case. That when I opened the door, after I inadvertently stand on this smoke sensor, which informed me that there was smoke. And when I put out that sensor, and when I smelled something, I checked outside the door and checked inside the kitchen, there was nothing. And I went to the room where the room door was closed, which was admitted, as the court was already proven, admitted to be the starting place of the fire. When I went there, and in turn, I opened the door. The two cats made out of the room. And one of them went like that. And there was no burn, no scars on them. So, liability here from fires that they got off the 7th floor rather than the 9th floor and the 8th floor. And if they got there quicker, animals would be alive. But again, from that again showed that the police did not do any investigation. Showed that this so-called 22-year detective took my words and then took my house and file and said, oh, I can pick it on him because he won't fight back. If I didn't, I died on the street. Peter Khroushchev would have caused a public death. Me and my animal and blame it on homelessness. Why did I continue to pay my rent every single month? And why did I didn't show up for each and a tenant case for my case that was on previously? And in turn, imagine that a cop charges until due to the fact that someone was in community housing and they had a mental health issue. That's against the laws in Canada. And we expect the ombudsman, the OIP, the LECA to investigate. And we are asking for the special investigative unit of the Toronto Police to also investigate due to the grounds that my two animals died in the fire. And the police were involved with motive due to the fact that they were named the defendant in a case in the Superior Court of Ontario, where they and the overseer, the YPRD and MECA, were put on trial. And in turn, the judges, it turned out through emails we have received, did rule in our favor that they did break the law. So the police officers lied, that the investigator did not investigate, and that LECA did not see that the police did their job and asked for re-investigation of the case. We thank God for that. But we are going to end corruption in all forms of services that are funded or represent the people of the city of Toronto, or those who live, or those who frequent the city, because Toronto will be a good city, a city of happiness. And if we bring injustice to those who frequent the city and others, how can we expect a happy city? I'm Mr. Kevin Clark. I am people's candidate, the people's representative, and we will be facing off against my one declared opponent, the Toronto media, the only one who can stop us from what we have heard, the office of Toronto Mayor. Because together we'll inspire, together we will achieve, together we can defeat those who deceive, so they wrongfully receive what they have not earned, such as Peter Khroushchev taking the ball and laying false charges against me to try to nullify us, continue with our corrupt case against the Toronto Police and PC Kerr and the investigator and their overseer, and hoping discarding of our evidence, our electronic devices and things that we use to operate them, and disposing of all our properties and all our records so that they can eventually come out of the Superior Court as not being what we allege. Not forthright, unlawful, and corrupt. So we will follow through on all paperwork, and we do also ask the courts to extend any notices that have been passed since March 30th, 2025, up to this date, or up to the date I return back to my unit, to extend the time for appeals on all these or any dismissal. Because we just recently found out that they did the courts did rule in our favor against the Toronto Police and the OIPRD, also known as LECA, LECA, Law Enforcement Service. Kevin Clark, Toronto Mayor. Peace be to all. Holla, holla, holla. That's what it's all about. One love. If you wish to contribute to our legal battles, to great corruption of the Toronto Police Service, Toronto Housing, or any other agency or service of government, you can do so by email. Create, CREATING, good, GOOD, people, PEOPLE, @gmail.com, or text or call if you wish to volunteer time to 647-745-2760. To my opponents in the Toronto media. Last election, we tore down the curtains of the Daily Bread Food Bank and you referred to us as the protesters, as the disturbers, but you wouldn't mention my name. But you will mention the name of the People's Champion, the incoming mayor of Toronto, Mr. Kevin Clark, because I have really as associate mayor as a guy that should be soon to be oldest in Toronto. And I have the greatest deputy mayor. Naturally, those are the children. The associate mayors are the good people. The good people. What's up, bro? I'm just doing a video about our campaign from there. And another, this is why we started the video. Also, Toronto Housing targeted tenants. Tenants, because these tenants try to get out of the norm of things that are expected here. People to sit down and wait for a welfare check, or people not to do anything and be productive. Like, for example, I have a neighbor who's very, very productive, but she has an animal. Now, she has people taking care of her animal, and she goes around to try and build a better life for herself, so she'll always be in housing. Housing decides to attack her because you'll have greedy, selfish people who will complain because misery loves company. So they see she's moving forward, or he's moving forward, taking care of himself, taking care of their neighbors, helping others. So in turn, those envious people would go to friends they have in housing and then try to cause disruption for these. Now, I can vouch for this tenant period because it's not like the other neighbor that has one person living there, the only person, consistently for the past 4 or 5 years. Another person up there who has people living there for the past 4 or 5 years, and he says girlfriend, but they have a 2-bedroom unit. This neighbor has different people taking care of their animal, and they're not charging them rent. They are paying them to do this service. So how can housing discriminate against them because they live in Toronto community housing? No matter where else you rent, if you're traveling or if you're going to stay with family and you have an animal, and there's so much places where you're not allowed to take an animal. So is this person supposed to not go and try and get out of the cycle? And I vouch for them because I've seen times where packages sat at their days, their days. So if somebody was living there and paying rent, they would have gotten their package right off. Seen days where there's no activity. But then they're saying that, oh, they've been watching her, or they've got evidence. Well, hold it. I'm the neighbor. I'm the neighbor. Who should know more aside from the neighbor, right? And sure, if it was, I'm running for mayor, so I'm not going to vote. And I said we're going to fix the housing and stop the abuse. So I'm not going to vote. I would also